So with that, I'd like to kick it off to our moderator for this evening, Mr. Jeff Johnson. As we go through this process, we wanted to make it really, really open. So everybody has the opportunity to mute or unmute yourself. We ask that you respect our panelists and that you stay muted until the time that a question is asked to the general population. Our panelists for tonight, I'm going to start with our lead sponsor, Mr. Chris Simon. Chris Simon is the CEO and founder of BTST Services. BTST Services, one thing that I'll say about them is that when it comes to the aesthetic of mental health, breaking down the stigma and making it attractive, the BTST Services led by Mr. Chris Simon, they have an expertise that I've not seen anywhere else in that space of really kind of making the stigma a thing that we got to talk about. How do we break that down? How do we make it relevant to our community? Also joining us is my brother Mujahid Muhammad, the founder and president of Keys Development, which is an organization who I've had the pleasure of partnering with on many instances. They really have a heart and an understanding for navigating our communities, for reaching our young people. And so Muhammad, I'm grateful to have you on with us. Also with us is the man, the legend, Brother Richard Rowe, who's been leading this work in Baltimore for some time. He's a mentor of mine, somebody who I'm grateful to know and just grateful for. So Brother Richard, I thank you as well for being with us on behalf of the Black Mental Health Alliance, as well as someone who has known me since I was in Pampers, Brother Brian Miller. And so I just want to give a precursor. If he calls me Little Earl, it's not that somebody else is on the call. It's just that he knows me that well. He knows me.
I'm to say James. I'm going to try to say James, sir.
We're gonna love you regardless, whichever way you do it. So thank you so much for being on. And now to introduce a man who really needs no introduction. He's known in our community as a leader, as a thought leader. He is a social architect, but for so many things, he is always on the right side. He is a moral compass for our community. He is someone who has a heart for Baltimore. And though he could live anywhere else in the world, and he's been everywhere doing this work, Brother Jeff Johnson is here with us, and we're so grateful to have you here. And again, I'm gonna kick it off to you. You said that you want to have a real conversation, and there's nobody else who I believe should be leading us in this real conversation around mental wellness and trauma. So Brother Jeff, again, thank you for being here. By all means, sir, please lead us.
Brother James, thank you so much. I appreciate being here this evening, and don't see my role as one of leadership, but one of facilitation. Because even as I enter into this space of self-mastery and thriving versus surviving, I recognize that the brothers who are here in this conversation have committed their lives to this work in a way that I'm attempting to learn from them. And so I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have. Some of us have high levels of understanding around what the state of what some call behavioral health, what others call mental health, what others call mental wellness, what some call a myriad of things, and how it relates to the Black community and Black boys and men in particular. But I think there's a couple of things that are worth reminding us of. And that is, number one, that Black men have some of the highest rates of toxic stress, highest rates of anxiety, have some of the highest rates of undiagnosed depression. And I want to be clear about undiagnosed depression, often because we don't go get diagnosed. We have some of the highest rates of attempted suicide, and we have the lowest life expectancy of any demographic in the United States. And when we think about that, we got to think about that through a couple of lenses. One is that when you think about the clinical space, those clinicians that are either on the panel or part of this conversation will tell you that how clinicians are trained in this country, they're not even prepared to effectively treat most Black people, let alone Black men. Most approaches for therapy are about how do we help treat a single trauma. And the reality is that most Black people, Black men, and this is beyond what your social economic level is or what part of the country you come from. The reality is that most Black people and Black men are dealing with compounded trauma, multiple traumas, most of which have been undiagnosed and in some cases misdiagnosed. And as a result, even some Black folks that have gone through clinical preparation are not effectively clinically prepared to deal with the complexity of who we are as human beings. The second thing is that the behavioral health space has been, and some would call it inept, some would say racist, some would say something else, but the reality is there is very little cultural intentionality within the behavioral health space. And outside of the real dedicated professionals that are reflected in the brothers that are here in different parts of the country and frankly in different parts of the world, the behavioral health space isn't even really interested in super serving with a level of cultural intentionality because it doesn't translate into the level of income and return that they believe that it should. And so even as we think about the fact that the clinical space and the behavioral health space is overwhelmingly populated by non-people of color, even people of color, because of how they've been trained, don't have a level of intentionality around what it takes to do what some of these brothers have been doing, not only with a level of intention, but with a level of mastery, recognizing that there are multiple pathways that this work needs to be done, from a one-on-one engagement to institutional infrastructure, from research to development of curriculum and engagement strategies, as well as demystifying the space and recognizing that one of the biggest problems with therapy as its current narrative sits is that we communicate therapy through the lens of coping. And the last I checked, I don't know no brother that just wants to cope. And so why would I submit myself to bear myself down, to have a level of transparency, to be raw when everything I've been taught culturally tells me not to, for you to get me to cope as opposed to get me to overcome. And if we don't have a real shift in how not only this industry, but those of us within it are approaching Black boys and men, they do not believe that these are tools of empowerment, but they often believe that these are tools of pacifying them. And so these brothers in particular that you're going to hear from today, I think have done a fantastic job of calling some of the traditional mechanisms of therapy and treatment and engagement as a lie, as understanding that the goal for us is not to cope. The goal for us is not to survive. The goal for us is to thrive. And recognizing that white supremacy in its truest sense manifests itself in Black men's mental health in two ways. So one, there is the reality that we walk out the door and many of us have post-traumatic stress because of the police, because of schools, because of institutional infrastructure that automatically says we're not good enough. And there's some of us who got a hood experience that think that don't translate into suburban and other places. No. It just translates differently. I remember my dad being part of what many of the more seasoned brothers remember in the 1980s was when Black men just started getting into corporate America in some leadership roles. And there was what we call middle management system. And many of the brothers that are now senior VPs and executive VPs and CEOs came up in that time. And me and some of my boys used to joke about the fact you could tell whose dad had been in corporate America the longest because of how little hair they had on their face and how little bass they had left in their voice. Because there was a time when you couldn't show up authentically yourself, because the facial hair made not just white women feel a level of angst, it made white men feel a level of angst. That when you came in your truest self, they didn't know how to handle our truest self. So even in this moment, when we hear about bring your whole self to work, I've told a couple of CEOs in the last week, you don't really want Black people to bring their whole self to work. You're ill-equipped to have Black people bring their whole self to work, because Black people are the ones that have ensured that there wasn't a fight at the copy machine, and that somebody didn't get hurt on the way to their car, because they've suppressed their feelings, because they've suppressed their anger, because they've suppressed their frustration, because they've worn the mask. And on the flip side of that, there also is the reality of white supremacy that has gotten us as men to believe that our strength lies within not feeling. And so I cannot cry. We tell 3 and 4 and 5-year-old little boys to man up. In many cases, many of the brothers that are on this Zoom right now can talk about how they felt like they were robbed of their childhood because they were never allowed to be little boys. Either because there wasn't a man in the house, and as a result, they were told they were the man of the house at 4 and 5 and 6 years old, or the fact that they were never allowed to feel pain or feel hurt or feel heartbreak. What's even more pervasive is the fact that many of us still exist in a place where we don't even allow ourselves to exhibit uninhibited joy, because smiling too big and laughing too loud might make me a mark in certain places, or somebody say I'm goofy in other places. I can't be excited about something because somebody told me I had to act like I've been there before. I can't have a level of unabridged love because in some way, shape, or form, that's viewed as being weak. And so white supremacy and misguided cultural development as a result of white supremacy has made us both on both sides feel like what it is to be a Black man is to be this stoic, non-feeling, non-expressive beast. And it's what in so many ways lifts the narrative of our inhumanity versus disrupts the very inaccurate myth of our inhumanity. And so as we talk to these brothers today, I'm excited about not only what we have gone through as men in this space, because I think sometimes there's this misnomer that brothers who work in this space in some way, shape, or form have reached this pinnacle of navigating their own trauma and their own issues, when the reality is sometimes it's harder to do the work because you're trying to help people evolve into their fullest, most thriving selves, when you simultaneously are challenged on a day-to-day basis with how you have to do that in your own life. And so I want to really deal and unpack in part of this with this notion of code switching that Black men have in some cases said is a value proposition, but in my opinion is a coping mechanism that is a result of being a slave. Because I don't see white men code switch. They show up who they are because they believe they own every space they show up in. And so you ain't got to code switch when you believe you own everything. You only code switch when you recognize that I got to be a different person in different places, because being my full self in any one of those places becomes a risk to my survival. And that is not freedom. That is bondage. And so while it is a mechanism of legitimate survival, and I'm not telling any brothers on as we have this conversation that code switching isn't something that you have to do, it is an acknowledgement that the reason we have to do it is because of the institutional racism that ensured that nobody's comfortable when we show up. And so I want to, as I transition to these brilliant brothers and I stop talking, is really put this in context, because I think that there is a brilliant piece written by Paul Lawrence Dunbar that said, we wear the mask. And he wrote and said, we wear the mask that grins and lies, that hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all of our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but, oh great Christ, our cries. To thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile, but let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. And as Black men in an incredibly interesting time in our history, whether it is a global pandemic that is getting ready to wreak another layer of stay-at-home orders, economic disconnect, housing crisis, disconnection from jobs and loved ones, and even houses of faith that in many cases were some of the root of our mental health. I'm curious, brothers, as we have this conversation, and if we can unmute Richard and Chris and Brian, I'm curious in how you all even think about doing self-checks. And so I wanted to ask a couple of questions of you all and of all the brothers that are in the Zoom. If you could, and I think that what we're asking people to do at this point is we're going to ask this of the brothers who are our panelists. But when the question appears on your device, you can pick an answer and then press submit, so we can begin to gauge where all of us are. So James, I know you're running tech on this. Great, thank you. So if you had to give yourself a grade for taking care of your own mental wellness, what would it be? It's a thing that you do daily. You do okay most days. You do good some days. You can't call it, or you're not doing good at all.
Yeah, and I just want to express at this time, everybody who's in the meeting, please feel free to participate. After we move to whoever answers this question first on our panel, we'll come back and talk about the results.
Great. So, Chris, why don't you chime in first?
Oh man, I was enjoying hearing you speak. So this is going to be a change of pace to the eloquent words that you were able to state. But no, Jeff, I think that you put it very, very well, man. And you were able to touch on so many things in that intro. So thank you for that. I would say for me, I gave myself a C. And that's because even though as clinicians, you know, a lot of times we spend a lot of time taking care of other people, that sometimes we neglect ourselves, and we know not to neglect ourselves. We know the interventions and we know what's needed. However, sometimes we have a difficulty prioritizing, you know, our client or ourselves. And I would even venture to say that my C is a upgrade before COVID. You know, while I was attending therapy, I just actually called my therapist and said, hey, I need a session this Friday, just to be able to, just to be more regular with my self-care. But prior to COVID, man, I was ripping and running. I was having meetings. I was building. I was doing a lot of other stuff. And at a lot of those times, I would neglect some of my stuff. You know, I'm a good compartmentalizer. So things that happen throughout the day, if I have relationship issues, whether that's through parents, whether that's at work, whether that's spousal, whatever it is, I can compartmentalize these things to still accomplish the task that I have to do. So a lot of times I may get visual victories, but I'm also neglecting issues that I need to address myself. However, with COVID, it's placed us in a time where we don't have to have as many meetings. You know, I mean, well, until Zoom, now you're still meeting probably more frequently than you were previously. But now you don't have to go to as many, you know, this may sound bad, but you don't have to go to many birthday parties. You don't have to go to as many baby showers or just lunch meetings and all these other things. So now you have extra time where you can focus on what may matter to you, whatever that is for you. For me, it's family, stuff like that. And I'm able to actually deal with, attack some of the stuff head on, issues that I may have been neglecting or just postponing or just pushing off, and not properly dealing with those, but then also being able to reflect about my communication style, you know, being able to be emotionally vulnerable you know, in conversations that I need to have. So I give myself a C because I have improved. However, I'm not where I desire to be or what I would suggest to someone else.
Appreciate
Chris, let me
Please, brother. Please, go ahead.
appreciate it. Chris, let me say that I appreciate you, brother, because I think where you started was so important. Us as, you know, we run these companies and individuals see us providing these services, whether it be in schools, whether it be the young people or adults. It's powerful for our young people to hear you go to therapy. You know why? Because I do too. That's something that we need to verbalize more often. We need to normalize it ourselves. And I would agree with you. I do a terrible job, but I have such a strong support system that forces me to fall in and take care of myself. And I think that's why I have a balance, because of that.
When you say terrible job, what grade would you give yourself?
I would give myself a C.
Okay.
I would definitely give myself a C.
So you call me my C terrible. You can speak for yourself. My C was all right. Your C made terrible.
I think you do a great job, brother. Because I know you. You do a great job. But personally, I say I do terrible because I take on any challenge that my young people are facing as my own. Mm. And when you have so many people that you're servicing, that you're helping to provide healing, success, and accomplishments to, we take that on as our own. And if we don't care for ourselves, it's so easy for us to burn out and not be able to do the work that so many people are depending on us to do. And that's why I'm thankful for that support system.
Well, you know what I would also say to that? I think another problem with that is, why we neglect ourselves, is that we've developed a toolbox of interventions to help us process, through. We know just enough to do to self-tune ourselves up. However, you can't see yourself within the frame, you know what I mean? So we have enough to guide us through so that we don't fall too hard. However, slipping this is a DMX reference. Slipping it may not be falling, but you're still progressively headed towards the floor.
For sure.
So let me do that. I want to make sure Richard and Brian get to chime in on this, because I really think this is an important question. Richard, where are you on this? What grade do you give yourself?
Probably a B, but let me thank James and his team for putting this together. I know some esteemed brothers in this space right now, and Brother Jeff, we could not have chosen a better moderator and open this entire program up, brother. What you said was so powerful.
Thank you.
Don't want to not praise you for bringing everything that you needed to bring to really set the tone, to lead us and to guide us in a very healthy and very, very important critical conversation. And to all the brothers on the simply say thank you all for part of this. And let me honor each and every one of you all. Know your work, know your spirit. I know your love for our people, and I know that you are here to save. And I want to thank you for being those kind of men who are working in service of our people. I would give myself a
Brother
B.
Richard, I don't know if something is wrong with your mic, but you're going in and out.
I'm sorry. I would give myself a B. Can you hear me now? Is that
Yes,
better?
sir.
No?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would give myself a B, and I'm probably the oldest brother in this space, and I am simply going to say that my B is simply because I understand that putting your oxygen mask on first is so critical. If you all don't put it on sooner than later, you're not going to get to my age. You're not going to make it, because the pressures from without are so overwhelming. As Brother Jeff indicated, there are layers and layers and layers of trauma, external forces coming at us every single day. There's not a day that we cannot avoid some micro or macro aggression. Somebody is basically trying to deny us the right to live. Lives don't matter. Minds don't matter. that message, that narrative is constantly being pushed. But what do we do, brothers? Do we muster up the courage to survive? Do we basically decide to love ourselves enough to take care of ourselves? We got to basically make that decision. There's no time to waste. If we don't do that, there are only two options. You will either what? Explode, or you will implode. And a lot of us are imploding. That information and that diagnosis is not really being shared by many, but you can see us dropping off. You can see us trying to skip over healing. You can see us tiptoeing. You can see us avoiding therapy. So I'm so glad that both Mujahid and Brother Chris opened up by saying, I attend therapy. I myself, I'm in 2 healing circles of nothing but men surrounded by clinicians. Men we meet every 2 weeks, and there are men in those sessions crying, have decided not to suffer in silence, have come forth and simply said, I'm in pain, I need help. And so we need to basically be on that path in order to save ourselves. What community needs their men more than any other community than our community? So brothers, I'm simply saying, and those listening to us, we got to make some decisions. And this is if you're not ready to make a decision to save yourself, I'm not sure you are going to basically be able to rely on anybody else to come to your rescue, because no one is coming for us. And so I would give myself a B, running hard, Brother Jeff, fast as I can to number 1. I'm trying to do something every single day to save me so I can basically help my family and help other brothers and help my people. And the oxygen mask is a metaphor for all of us. Put it on yourself first, because if you don't, you can't save anybody else. So I'm running fast to doing something every single day, and maybe we can get into some of those practices that I'm doing every single day to save me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, we have. Go ahead, Davon. I just wanted to make sure you were there, man, because we got to make.
I just wanted to speak for a second. And
hey, Davon, I need your face, man. I got your nose, but I don't have you. There you go.
I just wanted to say I appreciate y'all for saying that y'all go to therapy, because me and my friends, we teenagers, so we don't really know, and we'll sit back and make jokes like therapy for white people. We don't really need that, but it is sometimes where I feel like I really need to heal myself, and I would give myself a B, because with COVID, it just gave me a chance to sit back and look in the mirror at myself, and gave me a chance to let everything marinate and sit me down, because I was constantly on the move, worrying about school and work. But with COVID, it just gave me a chance to sit down and look in the mirror.
That's really appreciate that, brother. I think the other thing that, and I'm glad you said that, is we just got to start having a different conversation too about therapy. So we talk about healing ourselves. You said healing myself, and I like to talk about it through the lens of whether it's meditation or whether it's boxing and working out, whatever it is that gets endorphins going, whether it's deep breathing, right? Whether it's a faith level of prayer or silence or meditation, whatever it may be, those are self-led. So it's almost like going to the gym, right? So I'm going to the gym, I'm doing this stuff, I'm picking up weights, I'm doing this, but yo, when I get a trainer who's able to take me places I can't go by myself, even athletes know that there are times when you work yourself hard, but when you got a trainer, there's muscle groups that they get to that you don't know how to get to. There's a level that you can go to that you can't go to by yourself. And that's what therapy is. Therapy is the ability to go places you can't take yourself. Because if you could, you do it already. Approaches that help you uncover things that you couldn't uncover by yourself. And so, Dave, I really appreciate you mentioning that, because I don't think we talk about therapy through the lens of power. We often talk about it through the lens of weakness. And if you all begin to study warfare, and I mean historical warfare from the beginning of time, whether it is the Maasai of Kenya or whether it's the samurai of Japan, the greatest warriors in the history of the world centered themselves before they fought. Even in the Bible, you hear about Joshua going into prayer before going into battle. We've been convinced that all of these things are about pacification because of who leads it, when the reality is that these are all universal truths and physiological realities that if we change the narrative of them, we realize they're being kept from us because they actually give us our greatest power. And so, Brian, I don't want to leave you out of this, brother.
Well, I'm going to jump in there. I do want to acknowledge that a lot of powerful information has been already shared, and I won't belabor the point nor the moment. But my grade would probably be in the area of B-, because I am one that practices self-care because self-care is running in me. Because it's for me, care is about a synergy. And that synergy, I have to grant permission for. So I'm conscious of that moment, time, and space. But the struggle I have, just like there's a particular source that says, when I would do good, there's always a little evil around. So my struggle is often around the issue of physical care and making sure that I'm taking myself on a walk or taking myself in a space where I'm just sitting still and listening to the direction that's coming from the air or the earth or the ground. My challenge is spending more time in that practice. But when you talk about my oneness with life and my union with the controller of life, that's where I'm strong in. But there are areas where I struggle, and it's particularly around that physicality and that eating habit that I have. But otherwise, I'm often practicing, acknowledging, and submitting to a healing work.
I definitely want to come back to that point, Brian, because you just said something there. But Brother James, if we could just see what the results were and where brothers feel like they are. Clearly, most agreed with the panel, anywhere from B- to C. But a couple of you brothers said you can't call it, and some of you said you're not doing good at all. I think the beauty of this question is that this should be how it looks, because based on the reality of our lives, we're not always good, and we can't always call it. And there are times that we do feel fantastic. And I think the challenge so often in our community is we've tried to connect judgment with where we are, versus I think Brian talked about a level of presence. Yes. And understanding that those emotions, whatever they are, that are making you exist from an A to an F, none of them are wrong. The question just is, how do we respond to them? And I think as all the brothers said, and I wanted to go back to what Richard said, how do we got a toolkit so that if we're from A to F, we know what tools to pull in, as opposed to making how we feel define who we are.
Exactly.
Except recognizing that those emotions are like the ocean, they ebb and flow. And there's a number of indicators. So I want to dive into that, brothers. Because Brian, I think that you said something just about this notion of not only being present, and you called out that thing for you. And I find as men in particular, we often won't call out that thing with ourselves,
exactly,
let alone with our boys. And so I'm curious about, let's go back to you, Brian, on this. At what point did it become easier for you to look in the mirror and say, yo, B, this is it? Calling it out and then being able to address it. What was the practice in that for you, where you didn't attach shame to it or guilt to it, or those things that prohibited you from just seeing what it was, and then to Richard's point, being able to pull the tools out to start addressing it?
I think it was a crossover for me, particularly in high school. when, you know, I've always been what we call a horizontally challenged brother, but it's never been a situation that I personally struggled with. It was more of other folks' struggles than it was mine. But there was a transition for me when I realized that I would use my physical presence to, one might say, override other people. So I was using it for what I would call inconsistent purposes. And it wasn't until persons brought it to my attention, and particularly, I recognized it in high school, but it was rehearsed even more when I attended the University of Maryland School of Social Work in a racism course, and where I was the only one twice. So not only the only Black, but the only Black male in the course that was taught by a Black sister on racism. And what she said to me is, people want to hear you, but what they often hear, or what they often interpret, is that what you're saying is coming from an angry place. And so for me, it was real important that I begin to alter that space so that I can constantly be aware of my presence, but not use it to manipulate or intimidate.
So Richard, I want to dive into that, man, because I think that there are some younger brothers and some seasoned brothers alike that have had a difficult time. I remember having a conversation with my father once when we were having a conversation about my company and how I was doing work. And he said to me, Jeff, man, I wish I would have learned how not to make everything a fight that's not a fight.
Exactly.
And so many of us are dealing with so much trauma that we don't even often know how to acknowledge the level of anger that we actually have. So to Brian's point, we're showing up authentic and we actually think it's a dope day, but don't recognize not the beautiful intensity that makes us who we are, but I mean the deep-rooted anger and rage that is often associated with sometimes the human and social impotence that comes with being a Black man in the United States of America. And so how have you, either with clients or in your own life, kind of addressed that issue that Brian is talking about? Because our babies are dealing with that, and we often don't even have parents that know how to diagnose that anger and help them navigate their brilliant intensity without it having to be led by a environmentally produced level of anger and rage.
Right. So somebody wanted to speak. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I wanted to say something.
Oh,
I want to say first, I appreciate everybody who came out and was sharing their positive experience. I wouldn't say that my parents taught me to how to notice when I wasn't feeling okay. I had to kind of teach myself, because my own family members didn't even know when they were feeling down or when they weren't feeling good. My answer was C, by the way, because I'm doing good with dealing with it. But it's good days and bad days. I have days when I'm full of energy, I'm real energetic, I want to go out and do everything in the world. There's other days I want to lock myself in my room, but I know I can't, because I got a bigger purpose and I got a bigger gift in life besides sitting in my room feeling sorry for myself. And it got to the point, it got real bad. Like my depression and my sadness got real bad to the point they put me on medications. I wasn't going to therapy because I felt as though therapy was nothing but a waste of time. Because I don't want to sit down in front of no white man or no white woman, because I haven't met that many Black therapists, let's be honest. I have not really sit down in front of no white man and no white woman and be the boy, that poor African American boy getting his feelings tired and his emotions because of the circumstances and the situations that he grew up in. Because like everybody said, being sad was never an option when I was younger. That was never a thing. I had to grow up faster than everybody else. I had to grow up faster than all my other cousins because my mother was always sick. I've been taking care of my mother since I was 7. So I had to grow up fast, so sadness was never an option for me. Like, so it took a while for me to notice the signs of depression. And Keys helped me out a lot. Keys definitely saved my life. Because I was in a real dark space. Keys is part of the reason I graduated and everything. Because it was a point in life I was like, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. It is what it is. Whatever happens, it happens. I dropped out of school and everything. And some of the Keys mentors was coming to my house and checking on me and everything. Mr. Mason, Mr. Muck, he came to my house on several different occasions to talk to me about life and talk to me about how you shouldn't take certain things for granted, go back to school, this, that, and the third. So I definitely wanna, I wanna say I appreciate it and all that stuff.
Brother, one, thank you for your full level of honesty, but I'm curious about something. Can I ask you a question? As you push through and you continue to push through with the help of some of the brothers around you, how has that changed how you talk to your boys about this? Because there's a lot of older brothers on this line that, if they are honest, they don't have honest conversation with their friends now at 40, 50, and 60 years old. And so I'm curious, has this helped you, one, be more honest with your boys? Two, let me just stop there. How are you having conversations with your boys as a result of your own growth?
All right, so as far as my own growth, I don't try to like make my personal experience everybody else's experience, because everybody copes differently, everybody shows signs differently. So I don't really know immediately when somebody's feeling a certain type of way. I let them come to me and speak to me about what's going on. Like, I'm not gonna say nobody's name, but it's people that like Mr. Muhammad knows, Davon knows that. Something just happened. There's people I know that Mr. Muhammad knows, Davon, Tiandre, all know, and I've helped them go through real life situations, and I let them know that I was going to be with them 100%. But I also hold people accountable. I hold people accountable for like their actions and their emotions. Like, there's certain people who have actions, and when they do those specific actions, they don't enjoy the consequence or the outcome of the action. So it makes them feel a certain type of way in a specific type of way. And I tell them, you wouldn't have to feel this type of way if you wouldn't have carried yourself the way you carried yourself. So I hold all my friends accountable of like their situation, because nobody is gonna give you anything. So I definitely sit and talk to them about like real life and how hard life really can be, and not to take nothing for granted. And if somebody's actually legitimately trying to talk to you about life, then actually just sit and listen. And it's not about having an argument or all of that. And sometimes it's not even about telling them what like your situation was or how you went through it. It's about just listening. Like, not everybody gotta hear somebody hop on, oh, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. No, just listen to them. And if you listen to them, the more you listen to them, the more comfortable they're going to get talking to you about it. And the more comfortable they get talking to you about it, then you can start giving off your feedback. Then you can start shutting your light on certain situations. Because like I said, not everybody go through the same thing. So there's certain ways you got to know how to handle certain situations and address certain things. So when it comes to my friends, I don't put myself in their situation. I don't put myself inside of their business or involve myself with what they have going on. But if they come to me about it, I'm going to listen and I'm going to give them the best feedback I can. Like, I tell everybody, you got to cry. It's okay to cry. Crying is a part of life. That's definitely an emotion that you share. Mr. Muhammad has seen me cry plenty of times. Like, plenty of times. Like, if you want to cry, it's cool to cry. Do what you're going to do. That's part of life. If you want to feel angry, but don't let the anger take control of your life, and don't let the anger take control of the situation. Moral of the story is, just try to keep a positive space. When you feel like you're negative, like you feel negativity, try to find something that's going to channel that negativity to a different direction. Like, get that out your mind and get that away. So you just gotta take the negativity and force it out your life. Like, don't keep it around. And like, if something bad happens in your situation, don't harp on it for too long, because misery loves company. And the more negative energy that's going to be around, that's the more negative energy that's in your life and that's in you. So just try to keep the negative energy
Man, thank you so much. I don't even know if you know how much you blessed a couple of people. That not only your age but twice your age with a level of wisdom that you're showing. So, one, I just appreciate the transparency. Brother Rowe and Chris, I want to get you in, but I want to make sure that I see if Brother Tiandre has something that he wants to share first, because I haven't gotten him into the conversation yet. So Brother Tiandre, you've heard a lot of brothers talking, and I'm curious, as you walk in this, you're walking this like all of us are. I'm curious, as you look around and you see you and your guys, and whether it's at school or in the community, what do you think is most needed that nobody seems to be showing up with?
I think what's most needed is mentorship, because like Rod was saying, I think Rod said it was certain people don't grow up, but like father figures in their house, and they had to like grow up fast. Like me, it was just me and my mother, because my father, he was basically in and out of jail. So the main thing that we're missing for our like youth and stuff is like mentorship, and keys do help with that. Like, cause certain stuff like I can talk to them about that I wouldn't talk to a woman about, cause certain stuff you gotta learn from a man, not a woman. Like everything you can't learn how to be a man from a woman. So I would say like mentorship, but that's what we're missing the most.
Thank you. Brother Rowe, chime in, and then Chris, I want you to come in as well.
Let me try to be as brief as I can, because I don't think we have enough time for me to answer the question fully that you raised, Brian. But I'll answer it this way. And Brother Rastahudi, thank you, man, for your wisdom at such a young age, for sharing the lessons that you're learning from Keys and from Brother Mujahid. But let me just say this, Brother Jeff, I have lost a lot of close friends in their 30s, 40s, 50s. That's the wake-up call. I've lost, one of my closest friends who was head of the Baltimore City Health Department, the first Black man appointed to that position, died at the age of 48, I believe, and under tremendous pressures to basically live every day as a Black man, to bring his best, and the pressures built up. And he was a psychiatrist. This is public information, so I'm not sharing anything that. But I've lost a lot of brothers like that, man, who basically left this earth before their time, who could have made tremendous contributions, but did not take the time to take care of themselves in the way that they should or could. I could go down a long list. So for me, I have been basically fortunate to have heed the warnings from those brothers who have left early. Some of it, a lot of it, through no fault of their own, except that I learned a long time ago from Sister Dr. Frances Cress Welsing that white supremacy never liked Black men. Doesn't like Black people, but never liked Black men. And so she taught us why they're not liked, why they're not valued, why they're not respected, why they're not honored, and why there is a target on their back. So I have tried to heed the warnings from all of these ancestors, all of these great men and women, man, have come before us, who basically tried to warn us, tried to share with us that we better basically make something. And this decision, one of the most important decisions, are we going to survive, thrive, and prosper? Or are we going to succumb and capitulate forces that are constant and that never gives up? Our dear friend, and this is what racism, this is what white supremacy will do to Black men too. It will cause some to stay here in America, but it will also cause a lot of them to do what? Get the hell out. We have Brother Randall Robinson, who left, who simply, his book, Quitting America, a book written about the pressures trying to be a Black man, trying to basically hold yourself up and trying his best to simply honor his own humanity. very, very difficult. So I'll answer it like that. I've just been fortunate, have so many warning signs and warning signals steer me and direct me down this path, doing everything I can to really honor myself, love myself, and center myself. Because if we can come back to our center, more of us will basically survive, this gauntlet of forces that continue for us.
It's so interesting that you say that, Brother Rowe. When you think about the lessons of the ancestors and especially those that were freedom fighters, because whether it was the boys who left or whether it was Kwame Ture who left, you think about when people actually thought Dave was crazy for leaving and going to Africa, when in many cases he was listening to the ancestors who said the dudes who survived were the ones who detoxed from this system.
Detach, right?
And so there is, you talked very earlier about toolkits. And I think sometimes we focus so heavily on the clinical and the medical toolkits that we actually forget the innate cultural toolkits and lessons from our ancestors. And by ancestors, young brothers, sometimes I'm not even talking about those that we're reading about. Sometimes Big Mama had the most peace of mind.
Come on.
Because she had a way of looking at white supremacy for what it was, as opposed to the degree possible, internalizing that. And so, Chris, I'd love for you to feel free to comment as you were going to, but I'd like for you to transition into, for those that are listening that don't know, that don't have a toolkit, how do we begin to help people identify some of the tools that are available to deal with stress, anxiety, depression, and in particular, Chris, just being able to do the assessment on the front end that helps me understand where the hell I am, as opposed to allowing somebody else to diagnose me and be confused about where I am.
I think you transitioned well to what I was going to say. I think that with Brian and Richard and some of these other young brothers have pointed out was that there was a distinct thing that allowed them to identify that this is the time or this is something that I need to have happen, right? And for Brian, it was internal, and a young brother, it was external. But a lot of us we're not always able to process, or it's not as transparent internally. And I say that because, and this is why therapy is important, to answer your question, that therapy is specifically needed, because a lot of times when we deal with trauma, if you dealt with someone that has been in a traumatic experience, at times they don't even remember or recall all the details from that traumatic experience. And so when you ask them about what happened in that traumatic experience, they can't tell you everything. And then you ask them how they feel about something that would blow someone away because it's so traumatic, they actually don't feel anything related to it. And it's not that they're masking it. It's not that they're not being cognizant of what they feel. It's just that their body has found a way to disconnect that traumatic experience from the body. So all these traumatic experiences and things have happened are over here now, and it's not connected to the body and who I am. So when you ask me about that experience, I'm saying, yeah, that happened from what I remember, but I'm really not impacted by it. I'm really cool. And that's not just a defense mechanism. Sometimes we say, our first response is, how you doing? I'm good. But for some people in those traumatic experiences, that is really what they feel. But to do that on a daily basis, sometimes a lot of these, you feel lethargic throughout the day, or at the end of the day, like you just become tired because it's your body consistently managing all the daily stressors while also protecting your emotions and your feelings from going deep into this place. So often in these people, you find that they might not experience the level of highs and excitements that one would, it would almost appear that they have something wrong with their affect, right? Like something like you can get a new car or something and you're like, oh, that's cool, and you wonder why you don't seem to be too happy or optimistic about things. It's not that just, they're just bad people or just toxic. It's that if I allow the same emotions that allow the same body control that will allow me to go high will also make me go very, very low. Mm-hmm. And it's my body way of protecting me from going very, very low. So this is why therapy is overly important, because we may feel that we're okay, and we may actually feel that way, and it's not a lie, but what we need to do is to be able to process and communicate about these traumatic experiences, because what these things do, they impact us in subtle ways or big ways in our lives that aren't directly connected, or we haven't pieced together how they're connected to the trauma.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So whether that's, I won't even get into deep examples, because I can go on and on and on from there. But we might not be angry, but it may be another area in which we're not properly engaging, which would seem normal, or we're not actually, we're developing these maladaptive coping skills, I guess you would say, So therapy is overly important. And to your point, I think that it's hard. You can look up, a psychosocial assessment and get to know some of the material, but it's very hard to diagnose yourself because, let's be very clear. When you go to therapy,
Chris, just because I want to make sure that we're giving people some tools, I agree with you, but can we talk about assessment versus diagnosis?
Oh, gotcha.
Because there are some ways to assess how you're feeling that aren't diagnoses, right?
Yeah, you're able to, you will be able to assess how you're feeling. You can, there's diagnostic criteria that meets different diagnoses that you can Google and see if I fit some of these things and figure it out. But what I was going to say would be, these therapists, we are licensed and trained and consistently trained clinicians, professionals. So I can look at an assessment or try to assess myself, but there's just specific things or reactions or prompting questions that one is going to ask that is going to lead to prompting a certain response that I might not be able to ask myself, but it is.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, and I know it's probably time for Brother Muhammad to get in, so I'm gonna yield to ask him if I could just respond to that duality that you identified earlier.
Sure.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad. So I think what you were saying, Chris, in terms of the assessment, when you spoke about people, what I call being socialized to trauma, because we weren't taught trauma and what that is from a methodological standpoint, what that means. We weren't taught that as Black folk. We have been traumatized from a historical and communal front since most of us have started life. So we don't see trauma in the same way. I think when you talked about that duality, it references what Jeff was speaking about earlier about the mask, because we have, and W. Du Bois defines as the double consciousness. We see it, we understand it to some degree, but we have this inner conflict that we can't actually articulate because we're not always aware that it's connected to that. So we're disjointed emotionally, we're cognitively present, but there's this war that exists that we can't necessarily explain. But then we got to be functional in these institutions like work and family and community and school, right? So there's always this kind of constant warring. But I think getting back to the awareness is that you have to begin to identify that there is some imbalance, some level of your life is not at its optimal level. I can say I feel good, but inside there's something happening that I can't put words to.
Well, and let me like I think that's a perfect point, Brother Miller, because Brother Muhammad, like I'm listening to Ra speak, and in one breath he's talking about how he ain't trying to go to therapy. Not necessarily because I think something's wrong with therapy, but the vehicle of delivery of therapy that I keep seeing ain't for me.
So I think you hit it right on the head.
I want to be clear, like, what's the disruption that you're doing through engaging some of these youngins that is giving them exactly what Brother Richard and Chris and Brian are talking about, but you're not giving them clinical definitions and approaches. And so what are some of those tools that are helping them get the most out of it without having to embrace that behavioral health is something that I need to do?
Can I say something?
Go ahead, bro, and then I'll jump right in.
All right, so not every kid responds the same way when it comes to therapy. Like I said, therapy not for me, not because I don't think I don't need it, because I don't like the way it was getting given to me. But with keys, they don't make it a therapy-like setting. It's not like sit here, talk about your problems, and I'm gonna give you some feedback on it. It's sit here, you're gonna have an actual conversation. You're gonna actually talk about what's going on. You're gonna talk about why you feel this way. It's like has therapy aspects, but it's not a full-on therapy session. You understand? Like, it's not a full-on therapy session. So that's why I feel as though Keys has been reaching kids differently, because Keys provides therapists, but even with the therapists that they provide, it's never really an actual legitimate therapy session. It's you explaining your trauma, explaining your past, and explaining why you feel a certain type of way that you feel, and them giving you tools and advice. Like, it's not like a therapy session, somebody just sitting there listening to you.
So Rob, let me jump in there. Let me jump in there before you tell on me too much. So I think that one of the main things that we do is that the idea that this huge cloud of stigma around therapy and mental health is in our community, I try to get rid of that, because we really don't have a huge issue around stigma. We have a huge issue around the narrative that we have an issue around access to equitable care in mental health. That's where that stigma comes from, because for so long, as you hear these young people, the individuals coming to them saying that I can help you, they don't relate to them. They don't look like them. They can't, in this case, and you brought it up, code switch. They can't code switch and take off the tie and come like this, throw the hat on so they can connect, because our children respond to creativity and they respond to love. So we need to first get rid of, and this is what we try to do, we try to get rid of healthcare and mental health disparities when it comes to assuring that the people servicing our young people look, sound, and move like them. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that, and Rasta Hudi hit it on the head, is that we no longer can come with this generation and talk about therapy. We just need to talk. If I tell a young person that I want to have a therapy session with them, there's a high level of resistance and I'm creating barriers. When I come to a young person, I say, I care about you and I see that you're going through something, tell me what's going on, then we're doing work.
Absolutely.
So I think that something that's really important for us to do is recognize that, and I love what you brought up with toxic stress, because the impact of toxic stress hits us all, but it particularly hits our young people, right? So for those of us who don't know, and I know that I'm almost out of a job because I can call on Rasta Hudi and he can explain all about stress, but let me have this one, Rasta. So toxic stress is one in which if an incident happens, let's say you're a young person and you're in an environment and gunshots ring off and you're fearful for your life, it just floods you with adrenaline. And that adrenaline, when it happens once or every so often, is healthy. But when it happens all the time, it bears on your lungs, it bears on your heart, it bears on your organs, and we wonder why we have these health disparities within our community. Healthcare is mental health. And as long as we continue to separate the two, then we're doing an injustice, not just to the field and to the work of mental health, but we're doing an injustice towards our young people, because we know the statistics. 20% of Black people will have a severe disability and things like that, right? So we know those statistics. However, if we treat it just through healthcare and we leave out the mental health, then we're putting our young people who experience toxic stress daily in a bad place. And we are able to bring that knowledge then into schools. Because if we can bring it into schools and we can identify why a young person is less tolerable to yelling or test taking, and we associate it with them walking to school and the experience they had since they were 6 years old, then we can create the relationships with our young people where they're more likely to tell us what's going on, not because we're therapists, just because we love them. Thank
you, brother. So let me do this real quick because we got about 15 more minutes. What I want to do is allow some of you to raise your hands. And I think we should hear from you before we close out. So if you have a question for the panel, and really please, if you have questions, please raise your hand. We want to get to you, hear your voice, and let these brothers, and I mean all these brothers, young and not so young, respond.
I have a question.
Go ahead, brother.
I just wanted to know.
No, go ahead. I apologize.
I just wanted to know if any of the older brothers knew how we were feeling when it came to like having a mentor. You know, like I know that everybody's situation growing up is different, but I just want to know, did you guys feel the same way? Because I remember Tiandre mentioning that one thing that we need is mentors, and he's right. But I see so many successful brothers sitting in front of me today, and I just want to know, how did y'all get through y'all situations?
That's an incredibly important question, and most of us got through in spite of not always having somebody that not always somebody that loved us or supported us, but a lot of times we just didn't have anybody in our grasp who did what we wanted to do. And so whether it was having a father or not having a father, or having a grandfather or not having a grandfather, sometimes it was, I wanted to be a doctor, but I didn't know anybody that even went to the doctor. Or I wanted to be an engineer, but nobody in my circle even knew what the hell engineering was. And so mentorship has been an extreme problem for the Black community in particular since quote unquote integration. Because what happened was there was a time in our communities where the doctor lived down the street from the garbage worker, who lived around the corner from the psychologist, who lived across the street from the teacher, who lived next door to the veterinarian. And I'll never forget, some of you know who Harry Belafonte is. And I never forget him saying to me once that Paul Robeson, and for those brothers, young and old, who don't know who Paul Robeson is, please know who he is, because I just think Paul Robeson personified mastery. But Paul Robeson was this huge figure in athletics and music, scholarship, activism. And Harry Belafonte said, we got the benefit of him because of segregation. Because if there wasn't segregation, he would have lived on the other side of town, and I wouldn't have been able to walk down the streets of Harlem and talk to him. And so the disconnect of our communities, where we told people that in order to make it, you got to leave here to move here, created the space where we ensured that my generation, your generation, the next generation, all were going to need mentors, because we shipped them all out. in the name of progress, when that ain't no progress at all. And so I think all of us in different ways, I had a father in my life, but I didn't want to do what my father did. And because of the lack of sometimes resources, I had love from a man, but I didn't necessarily have guidance to get to where I wanted to be. And what's worse is nobody taught me the difference between old people and elders. And so I kept expecting old people to be elders when they wasn't, they just old. And old people are scared of young people. And so they feel like you trying to take their spot. Elders understand that you taking their spot defines their leadership and their service. And so sometimes, brother, not only do we have to try to find mentors, we got to be able to differentiate between elders and old people. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, brother. We have another question?
Thank you.
Brother Xavier Harper had a question, Jeff.
Xavier, go ahead, brother.
Yes, sir. Y'all brothers doing an awesome job. But I feel like I would be doing Davon a disservice by not answering this question as well, being one of his mentors. So for me, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I just chose not to be a product of my environment. Everybody else around me that I grew up with, I got people in jail doing life. I got people dead in the neighborhood I grew up in. And so we all had the same opportunity. But the question you have to ask yourself is, what do you choose to do with the opportunity? Now, we as Black people, we've been enslaved for over 450 years, right? So do we continuously use that excuse to become a product of our environment? Because if you're presented with the tools to be different, why not be different? You know, everybody try to be the same, you know? So like, what makes you any different, Davon, that you can't, you know, that you had to be the product of your environment? You had these type of people around you. So, you know, it's your choice of what you want to do. You know what I'm saying? And I feel that I'm using you for example because you asked the question, right? And I seen something in you a long time ago when we started working together, when I first got the connections. And so, you know, I told you this to your face. I told you you're different. So at what point do you choose to become that leader and be different than your peers, right? Because that's what I did. Now, I had a choice, right? I could have, you know, maybe if I would have chose the streets, I could have got rich, but I would have been in jail or dead, you know. But I chose to be in the field that I'm in now. And so, you know, like when y'all asked me the question the other day on group, I mean, when the question was posed to y'all, what makes me different as a police officer than the Xavier before I became a police officer? And somebody said, he's still the same person. We don't look at him like Officer Harper. That's still Brother Zay. So the same thing goes for you. If the people before you can go in that same path and choose a different direction, and you can do the same thing. Now, my question to you know, these amazing men on this call is, you know, I want one of y'all to explain the direct correlation between mental health and success.
So let me do this. That's a great question. I want Mark Mason to get his question out, and then I want the brothers to feel comfortable in closing remarks to either address Brother Xavier's question or Brother Mark's question. So Brother Mark, please go ahead with your question.
I just wanted to respond to Davon, man. First, I want to say, you know, to hear these young kings take over this conversation the way that they have, and you know, it's inspiring, and you know, it just shows the impact that Keys has actually had to, you know, groom these young men, man, and take them to this direction that they're moving in, this knowledge that they have. They don't even realize how much knowledge they actually have just by relating to, you know, these mentors and these therapists that they encounter on a regular basis. Davon, for me, mentors saved my life, little brother. Going through life, I realized that, walking on a fence. I felt like I was walking on a fence growing up in a pretty bad environment. And, like when you walk on a fence, you have to balance one foot in front of the other in order to move along that fence. And every time I almost tilted to that wrong side, brother, man, and it was always a mentor to pull me back. So it was never one person. It was never one man that actually, grabbed me and held me along that fence. It was always more than one. Every step of my life, man, even up to my 30s, even becoming a professional, I still have mentors pulling me, on that side. Even, Muhammad Mujahid is younger than me. But, like I can honestly say, man, it's an honor to have him as a mentor, a big brother. Even though he's younger than me, I still consider him to be that big brother at times, man, and I appreciate him. And, I want you all to understand that, it's okay to appreciate him too. It's okay for me to be older and appreciate somebody younger than me, just for being there and being there to support, and the knowledge that he brings, man, and the opportunities. So, yes, man, mentoring saved our lives. Most of the men on this call, trust me, we had mentors, and those mentors saved our lives.
Thank you, Mark.
I want to say,
I'm
Jeff,
sorry.
really quickly. So I want to thank everyone for joining us, right? As a participant, as a panelist, as those of you who have contributed questions, as those of you who have participated in the chat box. Before we go, what I'd like to do is have our young panelists, as well as some of our seasoned panelists. If there's one thing, and I want to do this very, very briefly, because I want to give Jeff, I just want to say thank you so much. And I know you said that you aren't leading this conversation, but you've done such a good job of moderating and helping us navigate this conversation around mental wellness. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that. But I want to give everybody the chance before we go, because we have about 10 minutes. If there's something that you want to share relevant to mental wellness for boys and young men of color, I want to give us the opportunity to do this. And the reason why I want to do it this way is because I want to give our young people an equal platform in this moment to share out the things that their peers may need to know, right? So Davon, Yandre, Hootie, feel free to jump in here. But Jeff, I definitely want you to close us out because that's necessary. So Jeff, I'm going to pitch it back over to you. You can select, or if you want people to jump in, we can do it that way as well.
No, let's let our young brothers go first. Rob, you want to lead us?
Yeah, I'll start it off. One thing I want to say is, when life get hard, you get harder. Everything that's put in front of you, that's placed in front of you, that's placed in your way is there for a reason. You're not going to have no burden in front of you that you can't beat. Because any obstacle that's in your way is always a way to get over it. You just got to find a way to get over it. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to have emotions. It's okay to feel a certain type of way about a certain type of situation. Just don't let it beat you, and try your best not to hurt more than too hard. Because that's when it starts to mentally and physically attack you and make you feel a certain type of way. And an experience I want to say real quick, how y'all were talking about the toxic stress thing, that's a real thing. Because I was in the hospital like in April, and they said that I had too much stress on my heart and I needed stress test. And it was because it was like a traumatic point in time in my life. It was a lot happening. And then when the surroundings, the things that was in my way, when they like led me to have that nervous breakdown and have to have stress tests and everything, when that was out of my life, I started to feel a lot better. I was happier. Things were moving a lot better and moving a lot smoother. So that's definitely a real thing. So moral of the story is, life get hard, you get hard.
I just wanted to say that everything happens for a reason. And I can say that I learned that from one of my friends who is Rob. Rob was talking about some of the people that he would help get through situations. I know he didn't want to say my name, but I was one of the ones that he used to help get through situations, man, as though that when I first came to high school that he was a year or two older than me. So I'm just going through the works and learning as I go. And he was always there. him, Brother Zay, Mr. Mason, with basketball and it taking up my time so that I can have something to do after school instead of just going home or being outside with my friends, because there's nothing outside, and being outside leads to other things. But everything happens for a reason. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, brother.
I would say it's good to listen to, like, how can I put this? It's good to listen like people that's been through situations and know like how to get through situations. Cause now our youth is like they don't want to listen to nobody. Like they know what they talking about. Like they fall into the streets and they just know what they talking about. They think they know everything. So I would say like it's good to just listen sometimes and not always talk. Cause sometimes you can get something good out of life, and that's all I would like to say. That's all I say. Like it's just good to listen sometimes instead of just talking and all that.
Thank you, brother. Brother Richard?
Probably the one thing I would simply say is that we gotta help Black men find, take back, and keep righteous Black men. They've got to discover who they are and whose they are. If we can get more of our Black men to move in that, come to understand their greatness, our greatness, and mental health will basically become more, will basically become a obvious concern of theirs, and they will basically benefit from understanding why they're able to be here.
Chris?
I'm gonna steal something from a relationship that we had with NFL player Hayden Hurst, and he always says, regardless how big he is, it's okay to not be okay. And once we understand that that it's okay to not be okay, we'll realize that what we feel, the emotions that we're going through, it's nothing wrong with that. It's normal. And the thing we have to do to follow up from that is, while it's great that we have a peer support, you may have a peer support system, you may have a family members that you feel like you can talk some of these things through, but to please make sure that you consult professionals. You know, you may talk to your family about high blood pressure, but when things get real, you're going to go see a cardiologist. So please make sure you do the same here.
Thank you. Brother Brian?
I certainly agree that we certainly need to seek help when we need help, but I need for this discussion to identify that mental wellness, mental health, mental awareness is really about a process of self-discovery. Is what you decide that you want to discover about yourself, and it's the journey that you take in doing so. Therapy is a part of that journey. Groups are a part of that journey. Basketball is a part of that journey. Work, school, etc., all a part of the journey of self-discovery. When you get to a place of success, that is a place of where you desire to be. Please do not assume that it is the external that brings you success, or it's what you drive, or where you live, or the money that you.
Brian, do we lose you?
It is those things that you have set out in your own task, your own desires to internally, and you have met your success. Thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Brother Muhammad, it's on you.
Appreciate it. I like to end where we started. There is a need with regards to recreating cultural norms. We cannot, and it's a lot of adults on this phone call or this Zoom, excuse me, that we cannot allow what was previously the norm of mental health to remain the norm now. We are people who have power. We are people who have position. And if we release that power and that position to the norms of old, then we aren't taking advantage of the power that's been given to us. So I'll leave us with this, that our effort to respond to oppression must match that oppression itself. Appreciate it.
I almost don't want to say anything after that. I think that that's right in the spirit where I am. And when I talked earlier about having just entered into this space formally and created a platform called Men Thrive, because I just kept seeing too many brothers that I saw Brother Muhammad like embracing and doubling down on a white supremacist vision of their life. And so even success is a myth, because success is determined by somebody else. Exactly. I don't want to be successful. I want to be great, because I can reach none of the levels of success that the world says I have to reach, and commit myself to mastery of my own gift to a degree that when I look in the mirror, I know that my greatness is evolving, because on a daily basis, like, do y'all recognize that some of the youngins ain't gonna know this? Some of your parents and grandparents remember being told, you gotta be twice as good in order to make it. That in itself is insane, because I know some white dudes that I'm twice as good at when I ain't trying. And so if I use them as the level and the bar of my greatness, we weren't telling our kids just be dope. We were telling use them as the bar for what success is. And when you do twice as much of that, you be just where they are. As opposed to telling our kids, don't even think about them white kids. Be your most brilliant self. And in being your most brilliant self, not only will the ancestors rejoice and the universe will rejoice, and whatever God you believe created you for this moment will rejoice. And so I want to disrupt, and I want these young brothers to disrupt every old, antiquated, foolish notion about manhood and masculinity. I want y'all to recognize that feeling is where your power is. And so you want to feel, as opposed to ignore the feeling. That it ain't about you against the world. Because when you got your tribe and your crew, where you all are collectively committed, Rod talked about accountability. When you're collectively committed to each other in circles of accountability, that's when iron actually sharpens iron. And you can't get stronger when you don't have somebody hitting against you to ensure a level of accountability and strength. I don't want to survive. I want to thrive. Because as I reimagine what's possible outside of what white supremacy has given me a vision of what I should aim for, man, listen, I don't even know everything I can do. Because I've been so infected, even in my own power, by white supremacy, that I haven't been able to imagine a world without it long enough to be able to think how Black men show up truly free. And so youngins, I just want y'all to dream so big it don't make no sense. Because in that, you're not crazy. You actually are healthy. When you're imagining who you can be outside of the stress and the dysfunction and the depression and the white supremacy, you're in a place where now your divine, your psychological vision of yourself is connected to the divine creation of you being here. And that's where I want to be. And I won't believe that I'm as healthy as I need to be until I have a divine vision of myself that's not clouded by the very white supremacy that fueled the toxic stress and anxiety that every man I've ever come from has felt. And so I just say thank you, Jay, for allowing me to be part of this conversation. Thank you, Brother Muhammad. Thank you, Brother Rowe. Thank you, Brother Simon. Thank you, Brother Miller. And I am in awe, Ra, Tiandre, Devon, of y'all brothers. I thank you. You blessed me tonight in ways I didn't anticipate to be blessed, for no other reason than just showing up and being you. And so thank you so much. Also, thank you to all of you that have participated. This is a short conversation of a larger conversation of the things that we need to do to get to a place where, damn, can you imagine a world where Black men show up whole? The entire world changes when that happens. So blessings to you all, and thank you again.
So again, I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. If you can, if you're not on mute, if you're moving around, if you would put yourself on mute. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I'm forever grateful to the Executive Director, Ms. Tisha Edwards of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, for allowing me to bring this idea to her. Thank you to Ashley Bush, to Eddie Hawkins, and the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, who have been amazing partners and thought partners in making this happen. I want to thank the Baltimore Advisory Board for your diligent work over the last 2.5 years to bring Baltimore in into fruition and for these conversations to happen. I want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Andre Bunley, who is the director of the Center for African American Male Engagement, which is a program inside of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I want to thank all of our elected officials and leaders who are supporting this effort here, including Mayor Jack Young. But most importantly, I want to thank everyone who's here. I want to thank Chris Simon's team for spending time, Ms. Jan, for spending time with me talking about putting this together. I want to thank Keys Development, Mujahid, Abdul, and Keith for the amazing work that they're doing with our young people. I want to thank Mr. Brian Miller, who has been a mentor and someone who I love and near and dear to our family for some time, for representing Time Organization. And want to also acknowledge Mr. Lamont Ellis in his absence, who is the CEO of Time Organization, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight, but ensured that Time Organization was represented here. I want to also thank, I want to call him Dr. Richard Rowe, because that is just the level and the magnitude of his greatness. And I don't even think doctor really does him justice, for representing Black Mental Health Alliance. Again, I just have to acknowledge Brother Jeff Johnson. I just want to say, Jeff, they always talk about giving people their roses while they're here. A rose is not compensatory to what it is that you do for us and what it is that you give to us. And you do it at so many different levels, brother. I remember when you were the youth pastor at Empowerment Temple, and seeing you there and the heart and the dedication that you have for our young people, and then watching you just level up time after time, but never being disconnected from our people and always having a heart for our people. And so I want to thank you, not just for this conversation, but the work that you do every day. I also want to thank Candace, who's on your team, who's been amazing in helping us coordinate this. And I want to thank everybody who is continuing to pour in to Mbkbaltimore. We are just getting started. We acknowledge your efforts in the city. We want to partner with you. So be sure to go to Nbkbaltimore.com. That is Mbkbaltimore.com. And make sure that you give us your information so we can keep you abreast of these conversations as well as the other amazing things that are happening in the city. I want to thank our young people last, because you guys are most important. You guys are going to carry this torch into the next generation. And I want you guys to know that not only do you have the ability, you have us backing you up. There's not a person on this call that does not love you, because they have the capacity to, and they will also support you when you call. So please, 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 if you need anything, brothers, reach out. Anybody who's viewing this, if you need anything, reach out. We love you guys. Have a good night. And oh, before I go, I got to acknowledge Mark Brody, who is the chair of our advisory board, who's on with us tonight. He jumped on late. But Mark, thank you also for being here. Again, thank you guys so much. God bless and good night.